Warning. This video contains Polish names and words that I cannot pronounce. May 10th, 1978. Jan Wolski was a resident of an eastern Polish village named Emilcin. He was guiding a horse-drawn carriage in the wee hours of the morning when he noticed two strange figures, their skin green in color, eyes slanted, cheeks protruding, and fingers webbed, dressed in a kind of black jumpsuit or overalls. They jumped onto his cart, speaking a strange language. They then started to communicate with him via hand gestures. Soon, the trio came upon a clearing, which revealed an all-white craft floating in the clearing about 4 meters above the ground. Wolski goes on to say that, quote, "They were talking in thin voices, unknown to me. I didn't understand any of it. All in all, I drove out from behind the bushes and there's this, well, some car hovering in the air. Now that made me wonder, how could a car hang in the air and float up and down?" They communicated for him to stop the horse and cart via hand signals. Wolski did so. There was a small lift or elevator type contraption the beings gestured for Wolski to step onto. He and one of the beings entered the lift. It carried them to the entrance of the craft. He noticed, quote, 4 barrel-type objects on the craft corners with what looked like drills. These black drill-like objects were rotating around its axis with great speed, although without creating any disturbances in the air. They generated a hum. The craft had no windows, and the only light was coming from the open door, which he said rolled up like a piece of cloth to open and close. Once inside, Wolski saw blackbirds he describes as crows, rooks, or ravens. He says that they were in front of the wall opposite him and the beings, and that they were, quote, moving their wings, legs, and heads, but weren't moving around. He also saw 2 other similar beings, like the ones that had jumped onto his cart, as well as 8 to 10 small benches. The beings gestured for Wolski to undress. He complied, and one of the beings started to move a device that looked like 2 saucers put together over and around his body. They then gestured for him to get dressed. They asked him through hand movements if he wanted to eat some type of icicle-like matter. Wolski declined. The beings motioned for him to leave. As he was about to depart the craft, he turned around facing the beings and said goodbye. Mr. Wolski says that they took a bow, and when he turned around to step forwards, he was suddenly on the ground outside the craft. When he got to his home, he called out for his sons. His wife told him that they were outside, and eventually he found them somewhere by his barn. He told them to go to the clearing where he encountered the craft. They rushed to the woods, and coming upon the site, Wolski and his sons found nothing but grass that had been crushed and some strange footprints. People called Mr. Wolski an alcoholic, or thought that it was just a dream. They said he was drugged and hallucinated the whole thing, or that he was trying to get attention. One interesting theory was that this was all a ploy by the communist government at the time to try and drive unwanted attention away from the failing economy. People began coming in droves to see the site. Mr. Wolski says they interrupted his work and wouldn't leave him alone. One bizarre story claims that in 1981, 3 years after the event occurred, a TV station planned an experiment with a pendulum. They gathered a crowd of at least 10 people at the site of the encounter, and when the experiment began, the pendulum suddenly disappeared before the entire crowd. Mr. Wolski doesn't seem to have any reason to lie. He was just a farmer living in the country. Was he bored and just wanted someone to notice him? Did he come into contact with some kind of plant in the forest that made him hallucinate? Did the event actually happen? Unfortunately, this is a case with very little physical evidence and a lot of anecdotal evidence. There are statements that claim a 6-year-old boy saw the same thing Wolski saw, but others deny this and say that the boy's story was manipulated by a ufologist named Zdzisław Blania, who allegedly profited off this encounter for many years. In another bizarre turn, a book was published in 2013 titled The Polish People's Republic's Secret Ops and UFOs by Bartosz Rudolski. In it, his explanation for Wolski's encounter seems almost stranger than an extraterrestrial one. He claims that the whole incident could be chalked up to a bet between two ufologists, the aforementioned Blania and Witold Wawrzonek. Blania bet Wawrzonek that he could get someone to hypnotize him in an attempt to make him remember something false. It worked, and Wawrzonek did not like it, so he wanted to get back at Blania. Wawrzonek was apparently a hypnotist himself, so he hypnotized Wolski into believing that he had come in contact with aliens and told Blania about the story, all to get Blania to believe in a false UFO encounter. This theory seems incredibly contrived and outlandish, but we are talking about an alien encounter, where small green beings jump onto horse-drawn carts, eat icicles, and make pendulums disappear. Fact is sometimes stranger than fiction. This is one of those cases where high strangeness permeates the entire story, from the beings jumping onto Wolski's cart, to them asking him to get undressed, and finally to an object disappearing in front of the eyes of a dozen or more witnesses. Whatever Mr. Wolski experienced seems to have been very real to him. We probably won't ever know what truly happened that morning, as Wolski didn't even know up until his death in 1990, but we can speculate, theorize, and imagine. Thanks for watching.